Greetings, Episcopalians of South Carolina. My purpose in coming to you now is to reflect with you about our responsibility as Episcopal Christians in these days in our country and in our world. I'm speaking to you during the month of Pride. The history of Pride celebrations for LGBTQ plus folks in our country is that it began during the Stonewall uprisings in 1969. I thought some about the Stonewall uprisings, in which those in the LGBT community finally decided to respond to the constant incursions without warning by the police into spaces that were deemed to be safe for gathering. So the connection between that history and what we are witnessing in our country is not lost on us. And I reflected some about the importance of our rising up and standing for what we believe to be right with our words and with our actions, and when necessary, with resistance. The more difficult challenge is the matter of violence, which we are seeing writ large in our world. We know that the strongest Christian ideal is always toward peace as we follow the Prince of Peace. And yet, in our world, there have been circumstances throughout history that have led human beings to determine that war and violence of other types are the lesser of two evils to address a greater evil. I am no political analyst or expert, so I don't feel it is my role to speak to you about the political dimensions of what is happening now across our world. There are folks far more qualified than I to do that. As a bishop of the church, what I do understand to be my call is to ask us to remember the principles in which we are anchored as Christians and as Episcopalians. So when we think about violence in our world, one of the places to which we go is the work of Augustine of Hippo, who very early in the life of Christianity articulated a set of principles or guidelines which have come to be known as just war theory. Originally, he developed these principles to help Christians who were struggling with their role in the Roman Empire and the times of violence and war. Just war theory has long been held as a standard, one degree removed from strict pacifism, a standard that recognizes the evil of war and also allows for the possibility that there are times when it might be the lesser of two evils. However, there are principles that must be called into play for war to be considered a just war. Specifically, a just cause, justice during the war, which includes things like proportionality, a proportional response to the initial offense, recognizable distinction between innocent civilians and those who are combatants, and then justice after the war, which includes helping to rebuild, to repair, and to care for those whose lives have been devastated by the war. I think these principles instruct us in these days as we evaluate our own position, our own advocacy role, and our own actions in response to what we are seeing around the world, particularly in places like Gaza, Palestine, and Israel, in places like the Ukraine and Russia. I think we are called upon to look at these situations and hold them against the standard of just war. When we do that, we understand pretty readily that the principles of just war have been violated repeatedly in these circumstances. And we are called upon as Christians to lift up the voice of the lowly. We are called upon to be people who hold the standard of these parameters rather than standards that deny basic human rights and human dignity for those who have been so impacted and devastated. This is challenging because it's a 360-degree responsibility that we have. It's really trans-political. So it doesn't require of us or allow for us to become, as the Christian community that we are, singularly identified in a complex set of circumstances with any one political argument. We maintain compassion for all of those impacted. We maintain compassionate action and response when anyone is the victim of the horrors of war. What we must do is to hold our Christian values about war very clearly up as public advocates in the public square. And we must also act locally to respond to those who are most impacted, no matter their religious affiliation or their political convictions. This has always been our calling as Christians. When we speak of beloved community for all means all. Our work is to center the principles of Jesus in the midst of whatever circumstances are ongoing in our world. The other set of principles that we hold dear as the Christian community can be seen in both the Shema and the Great Commandment. The Shema, we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, and soul. And of course, when Jesus was asked what was the greatest commandment, he recited the Shema and he built on it. He added, and love your neighbor as yourself. This is at the heart of who we are as Christians. And so when we look at how we are to act locally, nationally, and globally, it is the Great Commandment that must be at the heart of our decisions. Again, our decisions about how to advocate, how to act, how to speak, how to pray. We must always ask ourselves, is what we are doing, is where we are standing together as Christians, reflecting our love with all of our heart, minds, and souls of God and of neighbor. This means that when there are those who are hungry, we feed them. When there are those who are poor, we lift them up. We strengthen the economic fabric for them. When there are those in need, we reach out to them to support them. When there are those who are oppressed, we stand to defend them. Again, this is trans-political. We have room for differences about policies. We have room for differences about initiatives and ideals. What we cannot do is to abandon those who are in greatest need, locally and globally. And so we must look with an eye toward where people are not being allowed to receive the basic things that reflect the love of God: medical care, food, shelter, dignity. Wherever we see these not being offered. Our job is to stand with those who need us. The other principle that we hold dear is found in our Baptismal Covenant. In the 1979 Book of Common Prayer, the Baptismal Covenant was expanded to include a focus on justice. We promise in our baptismal vows to respect the dignity of every human being, to seek and serve Christ in them. Every human being, again, this is a 360-degree discipline to which you and I, as Episcopal Christians, are called. It is rigorous and it is challenging to put this into practice. I struggle with this. I believe we must begin locally, and we must begin with listening, particularly to those whose experiences we do not understand, particularly to those with whom we disagree. Not in an approach that would deny our own convictions or that would lessen our commitment to justice, but in the conviction rather that God is in the business of bringing all of the disparate parts of the world back into oneness. And we are part of that work. We are part of that work. We begin our baptismal covenant each time we say it with, there is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God of all. If we believe that, we must live it in practice. We must speak very clearly every time we see those whose rights are being denied or diminished. We must speak out for them. When we see violence being perpetrated on those who are simply trying to live their lives, we must speak out in defense of them. We must make distinctions between political ideologies, where there can be room to differ, and matters of basic human dignity and justice, where our call is clear and where truth cannot be denied. So, my blessed siblings in Christ, I urge you to consider these principles that I believe are at the heart of how we are to be guided in these days. And as you look both close at hand to rights that are being challenged and denied in our cities, in our country, and as you look globally and see the denigration of human dignity, as you see rights being denied, just basic human rights for food, for medical care, for shelter, for clothing, I ask you to hold these in light of our Christian values, and then pray in your communities, in your families, about your response. Those responses for each of us might look different, but there are ways for us to act. We can act by being present with our voice. We can act by being present with our resources, with our money. We can act by being present in our compassion, in acts of mercy. I ask you to consider your voice, your resources, your capacity to advocate, and be engaged. We have wonderful tools in the Episcopal Church. We present these in our newsletter almost weekly, and we will continue to do so. We have communities around our diocese who are bringing hope in so many ways, bringing hope to those who are immigrants who are afraid, bringing hope to LGBT members of our community who fear that their basic rights might be rolled back, bringing hope to those who have long lived with systemic and structural oppression, bringing hope to those who are connected to those they love in Gaza, in Palestine, in Israel, in Iran, in the Ukraine, in Russia, in China, in the Sudan, around the world. I ask you to be engaged, informed Christians, and we will continue to provide ways to support you in that work in the Diocese of South Carolina. I thank you for the work that you are doing in all of the places where you live and move and have your being. Our voice matters both here and around the world. Our action matters. You are beloved to me, and you are a beloved community. Thank you, and God bless you.